So let's jump in and get started. So, just to start off, I'll tell you all a little bit about myself. So, my doctorate is in social work. I'm an LCSW, that's a licensed clinical social worker. I do own a private practice for mental health. It's called Hall Counseling Services. And we specialize in treating racial trauma as well as the queer communities or LGBTQ plus communities. I'm also the founder of this program called Healing the Whole, and it's a yoga slash psychotherapy program that I developed along with Marsha Banks Harold. She's a yoga therapist, and the purpose of the program is to heal racial trauma in African Americans. So, needless to say, this is definitely a passion of mine and has been, I would say, probably my entire life. Helping Black people in particular. So, as a queer Black woman, I definitely make it my mission to focus on the mental and physical health needs of the BIPOC community, as well as LGBTQ plus communities. And in my free time, I really enjoy, traveling. I love speaking. This is also something that I'm passionate about. I had people asking me earlier today, they were like, "Are you ready for tonight?" And I was like, "You bet your bottom dollar." Like, I'm so excited about this. And also, I'm really happy to be doing it with Magda, who I had the opportunity to meet, I guess, a couple of months ago at this point. So this is really, really exciting for me for sure. All right. So I want to go over some ground rules just because the nature of our conversation, it's a mental health topic. I am going to read this just because I want to make sure that everybody is kind of clear on the expectations around this topic. So as you know, the webinar is recorded, and whenever people speak, you can feel free to change your name if you want to. Your names, as far as I know, because this is Zoom, will be highlighted. Feel free to mute your video if you want to. You can type in the chat box if you're most comfortable, or if you just want to sit back and relax and listen to the information and the stories and take everything in, you absolutely can. But please, most importantly, please be respectful of everybody and their views and the experiences that I hope we get to hear from other people tonight. All right, so now that all of the yucky administrative stuff is out of the way, let's jump in. All right, so what is racial trauma? I'm actually curious to know how many people have actually heard of this term before. I feel like it's something that has come up more and more, maybe over the past 5 years or so. And I think that people are aware that racism has a huge impact on communities of color, but I don't know that we've always known it to be racial trauma. So racial trauma is the cumulative effects of racism on one's mental and physical health, and it's been linked to anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, and physical health issues, which I love to add physical health issues because oftentimes clients come in and they're like, "I've been having these headaches," or they complain of, body aches and that type thing, and or even high blood pressure, which is something that we see a lot in the Black community. And they have no idea that it could be related to racism or the racial trauma that they experience oftentimes on a daily basis. So there are three particular ways that Black people experience racial trauma that we're going to focus on tonight. One being police brutality or police violence, workplace discrimination, and microaggressions, because we tend to experience these things at disproportionate rates when compared to other people, other cultures, and races. So I want to quickly go over this particular slide because a lot of people don't know that there's actually a way to measure racial trauma. There are a lot of clinicians and therapists who actually don't know that there's a way to measure racial trauma. Robert Carter, God bless him, he actually came up with this scale, the race-based traumatic stress symptom scale. I call it the RBT-SSS scale just because it's a tongue twister. But as a part of this scale, it really gives us the opportunity to dive deeper into, I guess, client stories of racism and their experiences, very specific experiences that they've had. And then we're able to measure, these 7 different categories of symptoms symptoms and which ones stand out the most based on the racism that they've experienced. So those 7 symptoms that are a part of this particular scale are anger, depression, intrusion, so intrusive thoughts that we may have, hypervigilance, so being super alert and aware of what's going on around us, or being worried about what might happen, physical health issues, which I just talked a little bit about, low self-esteem, and avoidance of certain things. Maybe you avoid police officers, and maybe you avoid certain stores where you think they may follow you around. There are different types of avoidance that are related to race. So let's speak specifics. Let's talk about the specifics of these 3 different areas. So this graph here is really important. Essentially, the takeaway from this graph is that although African Americans comprise roughly 13% of the US population, were killed by police officers at roughly twice the rate of our white counterparts. So, we are a fairly small population, in the grand scheme of things in the US, but the rate at which we are killed by police officers is just incredible. I mean, it really is incredible. And so there's something to that. So when we think about I think the effects of the Black experience, the interactions that we have with law enforcement, there are a lot of symptoms, there are a lot of experiences that we feel as a reaction to that. And I just wanted to cover those very quickly, as well as go over some of the positive takeaways from these interactions, which can be a hard pill to swallow, but we'll get there in a moment. So the negative effects that these experiences have on us, there's regular, just general trauma, there's race-based trauma, there's race, let's see here. Oh, sorry, let's go back. There is race battle fatigue. So some of these I will explain because some are self-explanatory, some you may not be familiar with, but race battle fatigue, most of us have probably experienced it to some degree. Sometimes we as Black folk, we are just tired. Like we are just absolutely exhausted. We are fed up and we have nothing left to give, right? And so when you have those moments where maybe you've been like watching, the news or social media of our people being killed and shot, et cetera, and you just can't take it anymore. It's like, I'm turning the TV off. I can't even look at any more of this. We're tired. That's what that is. That's racial battle fatigue. So also the fear of becoming a traitor. How often is it that we may actually need the assistance of law enforcement, but we don't want to be the person to make that phone call. We don't want to be the ones who call the police and they come out and potentially harm someone who maybe they should have been arrested. Maybe they just needed to have a conversation. The situation needed to be de-escalated, but no one wants to be that person that actually picked up the phone. We talk about snitches in our community a lot, and that's something that no one wants to be called. Also anxiety, hopelessness, PTSD, so post-traumatic stress disorder, as well as PTSS. That's something that we'll touch on a little later, but post-traumatic slave syndrome, as well as psychological warfare. So, sometimes when we interact with law officers, they exhibit certain behaviors to intimidate us or to make us feel, a certain emotional response. So that's psychological warfare. Also, shame, fear, depression, feeling very heavy, stress, of course, grief, anger, and then vicarious trauma is it's a term that you may have also heard of, but just in case, I'll explain it. So this is also called secondary trauma, and this is what I was actually just talking about seconds ago, which is when the experience doesn't happen directly to you, right? So when you are on social media and you see people like you being harmed or killed or on the news, or if it happens to a relative, if it happens to friends, people that we know, we can actually experience racial trauma vicariously through other people. And it can have it, and even when that happens, we still see those 7 symptoms come up on the RBT triple S scale. So I don't want you to be mistaken that because it's not happening directly to us, that it doesn't have a huge impact on us.